He's an author with a long background in the entertainment world. With more, here's Joe Franklin.
Well, our guest, Charlie, has written more than 800 songs, 3 fascinating books, and a Broadway show. Plus, he's the grandson of the immortal Eddie Cantor. Brian Gari joins us right now with his newest book. I really enjoyed this book, by the way. It's called Close Encounters of the Celebrity Kind. He'll share what it's like growing up with and meeting all of our popular culture heroes and peel back the veil on the inner workings of show business. Brian, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. It's great to be here.
It's our pleasure. One reviewer here on Amazon said that the George Carlin chapter of your book was his personal favorite, Brian. What was your relationship, therefore, with the acid-tongued comedian?
I love George. George was a great guy, and we got to meet in a very unusual way. If you've got a second, I'll tell you.
Love it.
I actually met him when he was coming down 6th Avenue to go do the David Letterman show. And I was such a fan of his that I stopped him on the street. And he was very nice. And I just said hello. I told him I had a whole lot of his stuff, and he loved that idea. And I left. And when I left, I realized I had an opening song in my Broadway show that incorporated his name. And I thought I should get him the copy of the album. Well, I had a copy on me, so I drove around and caught up with him again and gave him a copy of the album. And from that point on, we were friends.
That is so enterprising. I'll tell you, the book, I mean, how many celebrities here do you chat with? Almost 100, huh?
Well, I think there are about 36 stories in the book about celebrities, all different
how did John Lennon and the Beatles figure in that narrative?
Well, first of all, I was one of the few people, I guess, that went down to the Plaza Hotel here in New York City and got to see the Beatles as they arrived in time for the Ed Sullivan Show. This is almost 50 years ago now. If you remember, the Plaza was so crowded with people, and I was down there at age 12 with my 8mm camera filming the entire event. And that was my first meeting with, or actually seeing the Beatles, because they all drove together on their way to the Ed Sullivan Show in a limousine.
And your book, Brian, gets up close to political legends. Where does Bobby Kennedy fit in?
Bobby Kennedy was a thought in my head that I can't believe I actually met Bobby Kennedy. But it suddenly came back to me that I was on 75th Street in Broadway, and there was a fish store there, and standing on top of a truck was Bobby Kennedy shaking hands with everybody. I had no idea who he was at that moment because I was taking the bus home from school that day. And I got off the bus and ran over there because they were giving out free fish.
Now, in this book, you share encounters with comedians ranging from Rodney Dangerfield to Robin Williams to Chris Rock. Which of them, Brian, was the funniest or the most captivating offstage to you?
Probably Rodney Dangerfield, I guess.
No respect.
No respect whatsoever. He actually got that from a guy named Georgie Starr, who was really George Schultz and ran Pips, the nightclub in Brooklyn, the legendary nightclub in Brooklyn. And he was a great guy, Rodney. He was always working out material for his next spot on Johnny Carson.
Or movies, funny movie. Now, how can I not ask, what was it like having Eddie Cantor for a grandfather?
My grandfather was one of the greatest guys in the world, and I'm not saying that just because he was my grandfather. He was so kind to me, so nice. He was so thrilled that I had an interest in show business. I would sit there on his bed with him while he was just lying there and talking to me, and we would read The Hollywood Reporter and Variety. That's how exciting it was for me.
I loved him, too, and he was so important in the first half of the 20th century. Brian, don't be modest about one thing. Give us the names, Brian, of some of the some famous artists who've recorded your songs and others for whom you've written liner notes, or a little bit on that.
Well, I've been very lucky. I've had people like Leslie Gore and the Tokens record my songs. Of course, I have a great cast album of my Broadway show, Late Night Comic, that features all these wonderful performers like Rupert Holmes, Tony Roberts, Paul Schaefer, all these phenomenal people in show business. And also I've written the liner notes and the books for a lot of CDs.
Neil Sedaka?
Neil Sedaka, a big box set on Neil Sedaka for the Bear family out of Germany. They had me write an entire book on Neil Sedaka. And, of course, I've done stuff for the Beach Boys and so many phenomenal people. I can't even name them all. Brian Hyland, all these great...
Your second book, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Stress Test. That was a good one, huh?
Well, I can't believe that actually got written because I might not be here today if it weren't for that stress test. I actually had a stress test. It proved that I had to go into the hospital and have open heart surgery the very next day.
Wow.
And after quadruple bypass, I decided to write a book about the experience, and I called it A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to My Stress Test.
I'm glad you bounced back, Brian. What can we expect next in the ever-evolving career of Brian Gari?
Well, I think I'll probably do a one-man show again, probably remembering my days at the Improv, where I started some of these clubs, the Improv and the Comic Strip and Catch a Rising Star, and I think I'm going to do a whole bunch of songs that I used to do at those clubs.
As a songwriter, Brian, you've pounded the pavement and you've enjoyed the bright lights of Broadway as well. What's your advice for youngsters now entering the fray?
I think they have to be really careful because it's not the same as it used to be. Now, anybody with a little home tape recorder and a computer can create demos that sound like they should be on the radio. And but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the greatest songwriters. You have to be really careful about that part of it.
Author and entertainer Brian Gari speaking with Joe Franklin.